We have an unsecured back door. Myself and my friend here are going to go ahead and secure the residence.
Sheriff's Office!
Normal, decent human beings don't want to lie. They want to get it off their chest.
Let's go back. Hold those doors up.
Sheriff's Office!
I don't want to be in trouble for something I didn't do.
Oh.
Sheriff's Office!
You knew Chucky got shot.
I did. I
I know you heard it.
Sheriff's Office!
Deputy Cannon and I were responding to a welfare check. Charles Hogue lived alone. There was no indication of anybody actually seeing him.
Sheriff's Office!
I started to knock on the door,
Sheriff's Office!
and that's when I noticed an elderly man laying face down in the backyard.
Stand by, but he appears to be deceased. 543, be advised, we have an unsecured back door. Myself and my friend here are going to go ahead and secure the residence, see if there's anybody, any other possible victims.
Sheriff's Office! Sheriff's Office!
Clear.
There does not appear to be anybody else inside the residence.
It's already started to rain. I've already attempted to dump the body. I'm looking for additional material now.
As I came up to the body, he had a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. And both of his arms were folded underneath him, but coming out to one side, which meant his body didn't have a chance to catch himself when he fell, like he'd been struck from behind.
We rolled him. We wanted to rule out the possibility of suicide. We weren't able to locate any firearm, but we did locate a shell casing. And we knew at that time we had a homicide. We didn't see any signs of forced entry. The home wasn't ransacked, but Mr. Hogue's wallet, his keys, and cell phone were missing. In the kitchen was a partially eaten hamburger, French fries. That certainly suggested that maybe somebody had arrived unexpectedly at the home. Once we got into his bedroom, we noticed some 9mm pistol ammunition in a drawer, and it did match the shell casing that we found in the backyard. In the guest bathroom, I located a Bulldog brand pistol holster, but we never located any kind of pistol.
So that brought up a red flag. Where was this pistol? We had no known suspect, no murder weapon, not a clue which direction to go.
We've got ourselves a whodunit case.
Mr. Hogue's vehicle was found behind a vacated building, and the area that it was in was very grown over. It was parked up against bushes so that it looked like somebody was trying to block it from public view. We get a search warrant and collect any kind of evidence that could help lead us to the suspects.
The only thing of note that did come from that search was the driver's seat was all the way in the forward position.
We knew that Charles Hogue was tall. The last person driving that vehicle was much shorter than Mr. Hogue was. The truck was now our number one piece of evidence because it was the only thing that linked the suspects to Mr. Hogue's home. We located a small local church who just so happened to have security cameras. And we noticed in that midday time frame, Mr. Hogue's truck traveling at a high rate of speed.
It's possible it was the killer that was driving, but we were unable to see the driver. It was very frustrating. We wanted to get justice for Mr. Hogue.
When I found out that Chucky had been shot and that he wasn't with us anymore, I went into complete shutdown mode. I was devastated. Detective Biviano asked if he had any known enemies. He didn't. He was friends with everybody. Charles Chucky Hogue was a salt of the earth type of fellow. He was raised in Santa Ana, Texas, and he went off and joined the Navy. He's a Vietnam vet. He retired after many, many years of truck driving, and he married the love of his life, which ended up being my mom. He loved her inside and out. After Mom passed, he was very lonely. He loved being around my family. He loved just being included in everything.
We just started cold calling numbers to try to find anybody who had contact with him in the days leading up to his murder. And then I called a number. A female answered the phone. She identified herself as Tara Wilhite. She began telling us that in the weeks prior, she was kicked out of her home and was a bit destitute. And she was walking along a rural highway, and Mr. Hogue came upon her in his vehicle and had asked her if she had needed a ride anywhere. Mr. Hogue told her that he'd be willing to let her stay at his home. I had to inform her Mr. Hogue was found murdered at his home. She became audibly upset. We asked her if we could meet with her in person. We felt that she may be able to offer information about things that we saw in the home, particularly the firearm that we were searching for. I know everything's been a little bit crazy, but we appreciate you coming in. So, starting from the day, that you first met Mr. Hogue.
You said it was Sunday, March the 15th?
Yes,
Does that sound
the
right?
15th. I was headed, I guess, towards town, and he stopped and asked if I needed a ride. He had given me his name and asked if I had somewhere to go, and I told him no. And he offered to let me stay at his house.
How long did you stay total?
Through the 21st.
I guess you didn't have a place to stay at the time just due to other family-related things.
Correct.
Okay. Tara had roughly stayed with Mr. Hogue in the time frame of the days leading up to his death. She had been kicked out of her home, and some of that conflict arose from a relationship breakdown with her fiance, Chris Brown. And prior to this, you never knew?
Prior to this, I had not known who he was.
Okay. Man, Courtney, he was an older man. His wife had passed away. I think he was just kind of lonely. He enjoyed having your company.
Yeah, I think so. But, Chucky seemed like the type that he needed somebody to talk to.
Seemed like he was lonely old man. That's the way she put it. Just wanted some attention.
We thought maybe a person might be able to take advantage of Mr. Hogue and exploit his loneliness after his wife died.
Did you see at any time in his vehicle on his person a pistol?
The only time I saw the pistol was in the house.
When was the first time you saw the pistol?
It was in the holster on a dresser right beside the TV.
In his bedroom?
In his bedroom. I just asked him, could he put it up? Because I had a lot of buddies commit suicide, so pistols are not something I'm
just not real comfortable with.
Not comfortable, yeah. I didn't see where he put it, and he didn't tell me.
Okay. And that confirmed that he had a handgun in the house that had been stolen from his residence. So we were confident that was used to kill Mr. Hogue.
When we talked on the phone the other day, you mentioned that your fiance, Chris Brown,
He's no longer my fiance.
former, that he came out.
We picked him up on the 10th.
And what was the circumstances of y'all picking him up?
We were trying to work things out. It wasn't something I wanted to do. Because Christopher is very jealous and controlling. I had asked Chucky if we could go get Kristen. Chucky said that was fine, and we ended up him just spending the night.
How's Chris's demeanor and temper?
His temper is very bad.
Did he get upset with you at all for staying with Chucky?
Chris got upset with me over everything. Yeah.
Did
he get violent with you or anybody else? And you don't have to go into detail.
With me, yeah.
Okay. This is a tough question. Do you think Chris could have had anything to do with what happened to Chucky?
Chucky was the last person I had. He was my last parent. So I felt like I lost a lot when I lost him. He loved with everything he had. Anytime you hugged him, it was a lingering hug, and he wanted you to know that he loved you and that he was always there for you.
Chucky was found on that Saturday on the 28th. Do you remember anything odd or strange about Chris's behavior on that weekend or anything?
Honestly, I don't know.
I really need to know. Did Chris say anything specific about Chucky, directing any anger towards you staying with Chucky?
He was angry because I was staying with somebody I didn't know.
Have you ever seen Chris with a gun?
No. I haven't seen him with a gun.
How tall is Chris?
A little bit taller than me. I want to say like 5'6".
About 5'6". Right. Anybody that you can think of, even your gut telling you, I'm suspicious of this person. I'm worried this person may have had something to do with this.
His girlfriend called that morning.
And I know that was something we talked about the other day, that Chucky had met this female online,
Yes.
right? She supposedly lives in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania was coming the week of the 25th, and I mean, it just all seemed fishy to me.
Okay. And she was a Vietnamese.
Her accent was very thick.
Okay.
I remember him stating that he had sent her $300 to make sure she had the gas to make it to him.
Did he normally talk to her through Facebook or on the cell phone?
He did have her cell phone number, but as far as I knew, Chucky did most of his socializing with her through Facebook.
Through Facebook.
Back to that Monday, do you remember Chucky making any phone calls, receiving any phone calls?
Someone called on the 18th. If I remember correctly, the guy came out on the 19th and he bought some weed from Chucky.
Okay.
How did you know that Chucky had sold him some pot?
Because Chucky had mentioned it to me when he was cooking dinner that evening. And that's when he had mentioned that he sold pot and sold cocaine and meth, and if I knew anybody that needed anything, to send them to him.
She was making Mr. Hogue out to be some sort of a drug dealer in Romance, Arkansas, and it did not fit with what we knew about Mr. Hogue.
And it definitely started to shift our viewpoint on the information that she was giving us. We didn't know if some of the things she was saying was fully true.
There were quite a few people snooping on his property.
If you were around any guns, we don't care.
He mentioned that he was sorry his girlfriend was coming.
Anything else?
Not that I can think of right offhand. So gut feeling is girlfriend, but I wouldn't put anything past Chris. And that's to be completely and solely honest with you guys.
In Mr. Hogue's autopsy, we weren't able to find any evidence to suggest that Mr. Hogue was trafficking any narcotics. His drug screen was completely clear. It started to put some things that Tara had stated in a new light.
We had subpoenaed Mr. Hogue's phone records and social media records as well. We found no records to indicate he was speaking with anyone on Facebook Messenger in Pennsylvania. At that point, it's very fathomable that everything she's told us today is not true.
Detective Ellis and I were starting to build our suspicions. Or why would you lie to us when all we're trying to do is get your help to solve a murder?
We sit there for a minute.
You're gonna put me in.
Put you in the corner?
Yeah. But I think I do that to myself.
She had told so many different stories. It seemed like she was trying to point anywhere other than her as far as what could have happened to Mr. Hogue.
We were going to have to start putting the pressure on her.
There's a couple things I want to go through just to make sure we can kind of get on the same page with everything.
I will tell you whatever you want to know. I have nothing to hide.
I know I've asked you too about Chucky's drug use. Would it surprise you to know that in his autopsy and his toxicology, he had absolutely zero trace of any narcotics whatsoever in his system?
Well, that would surprise me because I smoked with Chucky Sunday.
Well, he had zero. Absolutely nothing.
And now that just makes me look like a fool.
We didn't have the autopsy results when we first talked to you, so I couldn't ask you that question.
Well, I can't tell you what is and what ain't, but I know for a fact Chucky smoked with me on Sunday.
But nobody can argue with toxicology test.
I can't either.
So that's what I'm saying.
She's kind of pulled her hat down over her face a little bit. We're losing that eye contact that we had with her in the first interview. Now, she doesn't even want to look at us.
You could tell she was kind of starting to feel like they're on to me now.
Let's go on to Chucky's girlfriend. There's absolutely no record of him talking to anybody in Pennsylvania on his phone records.
Then why did Chucky tell me that?
He absolutely had no FaceTime conversations, absolutely had no messenger conversations.
Well, he was on the phone and he told me it was his girlfriend and she was Vietnamese.
My point is, as we come into this conversation, I want you to know we've done our homework at this point.
I'm aware of that.
Can I tell you my theory? Can I share that with you? Okay. Chucky had some nice things in that house. So I think somebody who saw all these things stole his gun and maybe even had a rough plan to rob him. And in the process of doing that, Chucky gets killed.
I don't know what to tell you.
One of my theories is someone Mr. Hogue knew and trusted to be in his house, come up behind him and shot him in his backyard.
The perpetrators in these cases are oftentimes addicts, and the only thing they're thinking about is how to get the next fix. So the nice man down the road that's helped us, they actually see somebody that they can victimize to get what they need.
What can you tell me about maybe Chris taking that gun?
I don't know anything.
I know you said there was a time when you came into his bedroom and he had it on the dresser.
I mean, he had another one that stainless steel or whatever, but that was in the closet.
Tara, I've got a big concern.
Yeah.
The first time we talked, you said that pistol, the original pistol in the holster, was the only pistol you saw.
I did know about it.
Here's the deal, you held that information from us for some reason.
No, I swear to God, I did not hold it back for any reason.
My thought is, you knew one of those two pistols killed Chuck.
She mentions a second handgun, which, why did you leave that out the first time we talked? Her stories just keep growing. It became obvious that she had forgotten things she had told us in the first interview. There's a reason these things change is because they're not true.
There's something else. After Chucky was killed, his truck was stolen. Okay? And when his truck was recovered, the driver's seat was moved all the way up. So whoever drove that truck last was shorter.
Y'all are thinking it's me, and you don't have to say it. But I did not kill Chucky.
But I think you know who did. Or I think you know more than what you're telling us.
No, I don't know who did.
And Chris is shorter, too.
I'm not pointing fingers at nobody because I don't know.
When it came to Chris, she wouldn't say, no, he didn't do it. She just blanked. I think there's also the possibility that if she names Chris, that may require her to explain more of her actions, too.
That pistol holster was not in that bathroom.
I'm not accusing you. I'm asking.
Chris can be pushy without being pushy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you this much. Whoever killed Chucky is somebody Chucky knew. Somebody who knew about the guns in his house. Okay. Somebody who was short enough to drive his truck based on the seat where it was.
Well,
If you're saying it's not you, then you need to help.
no, I don't know anything. Honest to God.
All right. Well, I think we're going to leave it alone for today.
We were feeling more and more confident that we were on the right track. But we didn't want to push it too far. We still wanted to leave that door open for a third interview.
And from there, we went to go find Chris Brown.
Any water or coffee or anything?
Yeah, water.
Water? Water?
His personality came across as more meek, not as strong as Tara's. And I think we felt like that may be more to our advantage in the interview room.
Have you been to Chucky's house before?
No.
You haven't?
Not before when Sarah was there and I stayed the night.
Okay. And did she invite you to come and stay at Mr. Hoag's house?
She talked to Mr. Hoag about it and he said that's fine. I know y'all are working through relationship problems.
Did you ever at any point ever see any handguns or pistols in the house?
No, sir.
Okay. How about any holsters, like pistol holsters or anything like that? Okay.
You can see he's got his arms crossed in front of him. He's trying to create a barrier between him and us, like a signal for him to feel more protected.
He was very nervous, very timid, just seemed scared right off the bat. He was exhibiting every sign of somebody that was guilty.
Well, I mean, you guys coming in here and talking to us is very important. It helps us just kind of figure out who was having contact with Mr. Hoag. I'm just going to lay it out on the table and ask you if you had anything to do with Mr. Hoag's.
No, sir, I did not.
But we know that whoever did this made some mistakes. I don't know if you know this, but Mr. Hoag's truck was stolen as a part of the homicide. And they managed to get themselves caught on camera.
We really did have video of Mr. Hoag's truck. The quality of that video didn't render what we're describing here, but that is the bluff. We had to play this interrogation a little riskier. There was just a general lack of any trace or physical evidence. It just didn't exist.
How tall are you, Chris?
5'7".
You want to take a wild guess as far as how tall the person was that was driving Mr. Hoag's truck?
No, sir.
He was between 5'6" and 5'7". I mean, hell, we even had the FBI come out and process that truck. So we can keep going through this, and I can paint a picture. And I'm a pretty good painter, Chris.
Yes, sir.
I might be willing to consider that you guys were in a tough spot. You knew that Mr. Hoag had some nice things. Maybe the plan was just a simple theft, and things got out of hand. And this whole thing was an accident, okay? We've got fingerprints, we've got video, we've got DNA. All I need is one drop, one cell, one eyelash. That's all I need. So is there anything at this point you'd like to talk to us about before we move forward?
Tara put me up to.
Okay. Can you tell me about that?
We were in a bad situation.
Mm-hmm.
I ain't gonna lie, I was on meth at one point in time.
Okay.
Tara told me we need the money. We were supposed to go over there and just grab a few things to go sell.
Mm-hmm.
And it got out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think either of us were that surprised of his statements that Tara put him up to it. Chris didn't seem to have that personality that he wore the pants in their relationship. Tara, she's a better liar than Chris was. He just broke.
How did y'all get to the property?
We walked.
When you walked up to Mr. Hoag's house, what happened then?
We talked to Mr. Hoag, see how he was doing.
Okay. And then what happened?
I walked back in, use the bathroom, and to grab a few things. And
What'd you grab?
It was a 45 pistol. And then I was trying to grab, like, his phone or anything I can.
Maybe something you could sell or trade or something like that. Okay. What happened after you grabbed those things?
And I told Sarah it's time to go.
Mm-hmm.
And Lee stepped out and he was out back. I started taking off and he said, "Hey, can you come here?" He said, "Dad, we need to call the cops on us."
Because he saw what you had in your hand?
Yes, sir. And it was a faint accident at the same time. I was holding the gun and my finger was on the trigger and I didn't mean to shoot.
He was shot in the back of the head. Did he turn to run, or did he just turn his back on you?
He turned his back on me.
How many times did you shoot?
I accidentally shot once. I didn't pay for this.
How close were you standing to Chucky when this happened?
About for needs here.
Okay.
Well, how did y'all get in the truck?
Grabbed the keys off of him.
Okay.
I got in first, she got in right after me, and we took off.
It was total elation, relief. I finally felt like Mr. Hogue was going to get some justice. We had him confessing to actually pulling the trigger, but we still have no physical evidence at this point. The next important part was the murder weapon.
The trucks, it was.
What did y'all do then?
Just no one could.
I understand. Whenever y'all left it, Chucky's truck there behind Midway, what happened from there?
We walked home.
But where was the gun?
On Sarah and her back.
And when y'all got to the house, what happened?
I grabbed the backpack, told her we need to get rid of it, and I took it down to the creek.
Okay. So what all went in the creek?
His phone and his wallet.
You heard me.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Am I getting locked up today?
Well, we're going to talk about all that. I'm going to take a ring back.
Okay, I'm gonna just stick this in your office.
Yeah.
He did take us out to the creek there behind the residence. We get to this body of water, and Chris Brown points to the water. We find Mr. Hogue's wallet and the keys to his vehicle, and a 9mm handgun.
It was a Taurus PT-111 9mm pistol that matched Mr. Hogue's Bulldog brand holster.
We were able to determine that handgun belonged to Mr. Hogue, so we knew we had the murder weapon.
An update tonight out of White County. Christopher Brown of Romance was arrested today on capital murder and tampering with physical evidence charges. Authorities believe he killed Charles Hogue at his home.
At that point, we knew we had to turn our focus onto Tara. She was running out of legroom to explain herself. We wanted her to feel comfortable in an area where she was living now. We were kind of doing it on her terms, which is not always the case you want, but we wanted to keep her feeling comfortable. So I told you we might kind of get caught up on everything, especially since we talked the other day. And this is Detective Warren. Detective Chris did agree to come up to the office and talk to us. I can tell you this much. Hopefully this will make you feel safer. Chris is in custody for Mr. Hogue's homicide.
I can breathe a little better.
We got to cover some loose ends. And one of those loose ends, Chris named you as an individual that was there with him at the house when it happened. And he's claiming some things against you that I'm worried puts you more than just a witness to this thing, but an active participant.
I understand.
But this is what's very, very important. We have footage of Chucky's truck leaving his house after the murder? What's going?
I was there, but I didn't know what happened.
When you say you were there, what does that mean? You were there at the house? weren't you?
Chris had me at gunpoint. And next thing I know, he's got the gun in my back and making me get in the truck. I promise I didn't do anything.
We take her back to White County. We knew that that interview would be tough with her because we were going to have to start putting the pressure on. Tara, we appreciate your cooperation so far with everything today, okay? We just want to kind of talk through everything again. You did tell me that you were there.
I was there with Chris. I was walking over to Chucky's to go and get the keys and pick up the dog. And Chris came up and startled me. And he put the gun to my side and he said, keep walking. And we get to Chucky's and Chucky's outside on the porch and he looks at Chris and he goes, something's wrong. And Chucky told me go in the house and lock the doors and call the cops. And so I ran in the house and I couldn't get there fast enough. And Chris came in and said, get in the truck. And he got in and took off down the road. And he told me if I opened my mouth, he was gonna kill me, that he wasn't scared to shoot me. And I still didn't know what had happened at this point. I said, Chris, what did you do? And he told me he shot Chucky. And I asked him why, and he didn't have a reason. But I didn't know that he shot Chucky until we left the driveway.
But where were you actually at when he shot Chris?
I was in the kitchen.
You were in the kitchen and you would have heard the gunshot.
No, I didn't. I had my headphones in. I had my music in my ears the whole time.
You're telling me you didn't hear a gunshot in a trailer with paper-thin walls?
What she was saying just didn't make any sense. She said she would put her headphones in and turn the music up. You're not going to do that unless you're trying to drown out a specific noise. We were pretty convinced at that point that she did hear or see Mr. Hogue shot. I knew she was lying, and she was very good at gaslighting.
Why didn't you just tell me this story on Wednesday?
Because I was still scared for my life.
But I've got some major concerns because your story's changed quite a few times.
Do you want the truth, Josh?
Yeah, I want the truth.
My original plan was to get Chucky to give me a ride. What Chris had planned, I don't know. We got there and Chucky told us to come in. Me and Chucky are standing in the kitchen talking and Chris comes out the bathroom. He said, Chucky, will you show me the truck? So Chucky said, okay. I put my headphones back in and turned up my music.
And you weren't supposed to be doing anything while Chucky was in the backyard.
No.
You don't want to come out of this looking cold-blooded and heartless.
No, because I didn't shoot Chucky.
Okay.
But you went over there to rob him.
No, I went over there to get a ride into town and to borrow some money.
Borrow or take his money?
No, I went to borrow it.
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think you're giving us the full story still.
Tara, I think y'all went over there to try to steal some stuff and it went wrong. Tara, that's why Chris had Chucky take him to the backyard and show him that stuff. Because while he was outside distracting Chucky, you were supposed to take Chucky's wallet and steal the other stuff, okay?
I didn't have any clue that that's what was supposed to take place.
That's why you put your headphones in, because you knew what was going to happen and you didn't want to hear it.
I think you watched him walk out behind Chucky with that gun, and you knew that he was going to shoot him.
I didn't know that. I had my headphones in.
Why you had your headphones in, Tara?
No, I had my headphones in the whole time.
That's a lie. You told us earlier you put your headphones in when he walked out back. And now you're changing your story again. We can't believe anything you say.
All I know is he told Chucky come out back, and I stood there in the kitchen with my headphones in.
Detective Warren and Detective Viviano weren't quite getting Tara to the point where they needed her. So it was time for something different. And I was what they would call the bad cop. Tara needed to realize that she was looking at some serious charges if she didn't finally tell the truth. And that's where I stepped in.
Okay, so let me introduce myself. Heather Meadows. I am his boss. I am the one that decides if you walk out of here in handcuffs and get charged with capital murder. Me. Normal, decent human beings don't want to lie. They want to get it off their chest. They want to be able to have a clear conscience.
I do, but I don't want to be in trouble for something I didn't do.
But you know what you did do that you don't want to admit because you know it makes you feel like is that you knew Chucky got shot.
I did.
Look at me.
I heard it.
I know you heard it. Do you care about him?
Yes.
Then you must have been so scared, or you must have been scared. Because that dude's scary, yes? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That's all.
I heard it and I put my headphones in afterwards and I couldn't think of anything else. I heard the freaking gun every time I turned around.
Okay.
Every time I went to go to sleep, I heard it.
Do you know what that is? That's your brain's way of dealing with trauma. Because you knew what happened was wrong and it made you feel like crap that you were there and you couldn't get away.
I didn't even know it was gonna happen.
I believe you. I believe that you went over there for a reason, most likely just for money, maybe borrow money. But when it happened,
I was in the kitchen and by the table and I hear a ring and I hear a pop in a ring. And I knew what had happened after that, and I put my headphones in and I ran to the truck.
take a minute.
She starts bawling. I mean, it finally hit her and it starts coming out. Her shoulders drop. You can see the relief on her, and it was like everything was just like whoosh. Sometimes it just takes that next step to push them right off that ledge.
Now I believe you. But listen to me. There's two people involved here. One of them went there knowing what they were going to do, and the other one didn't, and is either a witness or just as guilty as the person that went there because they're lying and they knew. So if you didn't know, now's the time to walk us through beginning to the end.
We get to Chucky's house, and Chucky just gotten out of the car. And I remember Chris just looking at Chucky with this evil look. And we go back, we sit in the rocking chairs in Chucky's room. And I follow him into the kitchen, and Chris comes about 2 or 3 minutes behind us. The only thing that was in Chucky's room on that dresser was his pistol. I knew that something was gonna happen. And I told Chris, I said, no, don't do it. And Chris goes, Chucky, will you take me out back and show me the truck? And next thing I hear is pow. And I put my headphones in and turned up my music and went to the truck. And Chris goes, if you tell anybody, I will kill you just like I did Chucky.
It was important that Tara admit that she saw him get shot or heard him get shot. That was the final piece of evidence that was going to crack that case and give us what we need for our conviction.
The next day, Chris takes the gun and goes out by the creek.
We'll have the wallet and keys in the bucket.
Chris took everything out there.
You know what would have changed all this? If the second you got a weird inkling, you didn't say, we need to go. Did you tell Mr. Hope something was wrong and you were worried?
I said, Chucky, don't go back there.
And he didn't say that's weird? Why would you say that?
I don't think he heard me. Because Chucky wears hearing aids.
I've done this for 20 years. There are people that come in and eventually tell the truth and say, look, I'm just a good person. I made a poor choice not to come in right away. I'm sure you can see how you holding off as long as you did and knowing that things were being destroyed. That kind of makes you look like you're an accomplice.
I understand.
She describes how Chris had asked Mr. Hogue to step outside with him, which we believe, was all part of the planning phase. And I still do believe she knew what was about to happen. That gave us the probable cause that we could arrest her as a co-conspirator to the homicide.
I don't think we will ever know the whole truth about what happened, but she gave us enough of the truth. I truly believe if Chris had not admitted his guilt, that she would have never, ever admitted to being at the residence.
We are following breaking news. A second person has been criminally charged in connection to a homicide out of Romance. 32-year-old Tara Willite of North Little Rock was arrested and charged with capital murder.
Tara Wilhite and Chris Brown are fairly unassuming individuals. I don't think anybody would suspect them of being cold-hearted murderers. And that's what makes them that much more dangerous. And I don't think that they should ever be released.
Mr. Hogue was a very kind man. It's just so sad that this person that he extends this olive branch to and is trying to help then turns around and is a part of his death. I think that says a lot about what a wonderful man that he was.
What I miss most about Chucky is just him being somebody to check in. Chucky was my dad. I just miss being able to talk to him and him being around my kids and my kids having that in their lives.
It starts with a phone ringing in the dark, the shrill sound cutting through a Minnesota farmhouse like a blade. Not the kind of call anyone expects at that hour. Not the kind that brings good news. Outside, the land is flat and black, cornfields stretching into nothing, frost biting at the ground even though winter hasn't fully arrived yet. This is 1986, a quiet farming town where nights are predictable, where danger is something that happens somewhere else, on television, in big cities with unfamiliar names. And yet tonight, something has already gone terribly wrong, and the town just doesn't know it yet. By sunrise, the calm will be shattered. By mid-morning, the word cold case will begin its long, slow journey toward becoming part of this community's identity. But for now, there's only a stretch of gravel road, a parked car, sitting crooked near a drainage ditch, and a stillness that feels heavier than it should. The air is cold enough to sting the lungs. The sky is pale, undecided, hovering between night and day. And lying just beyond the car, partially obscured by tall grass, is the reason this place will never quite feel safe again. The victim is discovered by accident. A farmer heading out early, doing what he's done every morning for decades, notices something that doesn't belong. A shape, a color that clashes with dirt and weeds. He slows down, then stops, then understands enough to know he doesn't want to understand anymore. The sheriff's office gets the call minutes later. The dispatcher's pen hesitates above the paper when the word body is spoken. There hasn't been one like this here. Not ever. Not that anyone remembers. Squad cars arrive in a cloud of dust and disbelief. Red and blue lights flash against silos and barns, against the kind of landscape that never expects to be part of a crime scene. Deputies step out slowly, hands resting on belts more out of habit than readiness. They approach with caution, with the strange mix of professionalism and shock that comes from confronting something far outside the routine of stolen livestock reports and domestic disputes. The body is young, too young. Someone local recognizes the clothes before the face is fully visible. A name escapes their mouth before they can stop it, and once spoken, it spreads fast, hopping from radio to radio, from whisper to whisper. This is no anonymous victim. This is someone who grew up here, who went to school here, who had plans that ended sometime in the dark. The scene tells a story, but it's a story written in a language the investigators don't yet fully know how to read. There are signs of struggle. The earth is disturbed, gravel scattered, grass bent at sharp, unnatural angles. The car door is open, keys still inside. Nothing appears staged, nothing neat. This wasn't quick. This wasn't clean. And whoever did this didn't seem too worried about being seen, or maybe believed they wouldn't be. Word travels faster than the deputies would like. Trucks begin lining the road at a respectful distance. People stand with arms crossed, faces pale, eyes searching for answers no one has. In small towns, tragedy isn't private. It belongs to everyone, and everyone feels it differently. Fear creeps in quietly. If this could happen to them, it could happen to anyone. At the sheriff's office, the mood is grim and urgent. Phones ring nonstop. Reporters from regional outlets start calling, sniffing out a story that feels bigger than the town itself. The sheriff, a man more accustomed to shaking hands at county fairs than addressing murder, gathers his team. There is resolve in the room, but also something else, pressure. This can't go unsolved. Not here. Not like this. They start with the basics. Timeline, last known whereabouts, friends, family, co-workers, anyone who might have seen something, heard something, noticed something strange. The victim's final hours are reconstructed minute by minute, using memories that are already beginning to blur. A gas station receipt, a casual conversation, a plan that never got carried out. Suspects emerge quickly, as they always do. An ex, a co-worker who argued with them weeks earlier. Someone who lived nearby and kept to themselves a little too much. Names are written on whiteboards, circled, erased, written again. Alibis are checked. Stories are compared. Everyone is nervous. Everyone wants to help. Everyone is scared of saying the wrong thing. Evidence is collected carefully by the standards of the time. Clothing is bagged. Fingernail scrapings are taken. A few hairs are found, clinging stubbornly to fabric. A small biological stain is noted, cataloged, stored. It's treated as important, but not extraordinary. In 1986, DNA is not yet the silver bullet it will become. It's science, yes, but distant science. Not something that breaks cases in rural Minnesota. Days turn into weeks. The initial frenzy settles into something more methodical, more desperate. Tips pour in, then slow to a trickle. Some are promising. Most go nowhere. Investigators chase one lead only to find it collapses under scrutiny. Another suspect is questioned for hours, then released. The community watches every move, reading meaning into every passing squad car. The victim's family lives in a fog of grief and frustration. They give interviews they don't want to give. They answer the same questions over and over, hoping repetition might somehow produce a different outcome. At night, they lie awake wondering who knows something and isn't saying it, who might be sitting at the same diner booths, attending the same church services, hiding in plain sight. Months pass. The case file grows thicker, heavier. Photos yellow slightly at the edges. Notes pile up. The urgency fades, replaced by a quiet, gnawing sense of failure. No arrest is made. No charge is filed. The killer doesn't surface. The town tries to move on, but the memory lingers like a bruise that never fully heals. By the early 1990s, the investigation has stalled. Detectives are reassigned. Some retire. Others leave for bigger departments, carrying the weight of this case with them. The evidence is sealed and shelved, labeled neatly, as if organization alone might keep hope alive. Officially, the case remains open. Unofficially, it becomes something else. A cold case. The phrase sounds clinical, almost gentle. Cold case. As if time has simply cooled the urgency taking the edge off the pain. But for the family, for the town, there is nothing cold about it. It's a constant, low-burning ache, a question that never stops asking itself. Who did this? And why are they still free? Years pass. Children grow up. Farms change hands. New families move in, unaware of the story behind certain looks, certain silences. But among the old-timers, the memory stays sharp. They still talk about that night. They still glance down that gravel road a little longer than necessary. Then, quietly, the world begins to change. Science advances. DNA becomes more than a buzzword. Across the country, old cases are being reopened, names pulled from dusty files, justice delayed but not denied. Someone in the sheriff's office, newer, younger, looks at the evidence list from 1986 and sees possibility where others once saw limitations. A decision is made. The boxes are reopened. Gloves snap on. Evidence is handled like fragile history. That small biological sample, the one noted but never truly understood, is sent to a lab equipped with technology the original investigators couldn't have imagined. The waiting begins again. Weeks stretch into months. No announcements are made. No promises given. The family isn't told, not yet. The town goes about its business, unaware that the past is inching closer to the present with every passing day. And then the call comes. Not dramatic, not loud, just a voice on the other end of the line, delivering information that lands like an earthquake. A DNA profile, a definitive match, a name attached to a crime that has haunted this place for decades. The room goes silent. Investigators stare at each other, realizing at the same time what this means. The killer was never a ghost, never an outsider who vanished into the night. They were here. They lived among them. They aged. They built a life while this town carried a wound that never closed. In that moment, Minnesota, 1986, stops being a memory and becomes a reckoning. The cold case is no longer cold. It's alive, volatile, ready to rip open old scars and expose truths no one is prepared for. And as the name sinks in, one thing becomes terrifyingly clear. This quiet farming town is about to face its past, whether it wants to or not. The name doesn't travel fast at first. It sits in a report, black ink on white paper, heavier than it looks. Inside the sheriff's office, no one speaks for a long moment. There's the hum of fluorescent lights, the distant crackle of a radio, the sound of a building that has witnessed too much silence already. This is what resolution sounds like before it reaches the outside world. Not celebration, not relief, just gravity. The DNA result is clean. No ambiguity, no partial match buried under probability charts. It's the kind of confirmation investigators dream of and fear at the same time. Because once a name exists, excuses disappear. Questions sharpen. Every decision made since 1986 suddenly matters again, and every mistake, every missed detail, becomes a shadow crawling back into the room. They pull the old file from the shelf, the thick one with the fading label. It lands on the table with a dull thud, releasing the faint smell of paper and time. Photographs spill out. Crime scene shots, grainy and harsh, faces frozen in moments that still feel raw. The investigators flip through pages slowly, aligning the past with the present, looking for the point where the story could have changed if someone had known then what they know now. The suspect's name is familiar, not notorious, not whispered in fear. Familiar in the most unsettling way. A man who lived nearby. A man who shopped at the same stores, drank coffee at the same counter, nodded politely to deputies he passed on the street. Back in 1986, he was interviewed briefly. Routine questions. Routine answers. Nothing that raised alarms. He wasn't arrested. He wasn't followed. He slipped back into the background like so many others. Now, decades later, the background is collapsing. Investigators start building the case again, brick by brick. They reconstruct the suspect's life at the time of the murder. Where he worked, who he knew, how he spent his nights. Old employment records are requested. Long-forgotten supervisors are tracked down, their memories shaky but willing. A former coworker recalls something odd, a comment, a habit, A tension that felt insignificant then, but feels sharp now in hindsight. Neighbors are located next. Some still live in town, older now, slower, surprised by the knock on their door. Others have moved states away, carrying fragments of the past they never expected to revisit. One remembers seeing the suspect's car late that night, parked somewhere it usually wasn't. Another recalls an argument, voices raised, then abruptly cut off. At the time, it was dismissed as none of their business. In a town where privacy is respected, silence is often mistaken for decency. The investigators listen, recording everything, careful not to lead, careful not to contaminate memory. They know how fragile recollections can be after decades. But patterns emerge. Not proof, not yet, but something unmistakably directional. The past begins to point. The suspect, now older, lives a quiet life. He has a family, a routine, people who depend on him. This fact sits uneasily with the investigators, but it doesn't slow them down. Justice doesn't ask permission from the present. It only demands honesty from the past. They begin surveillance. Subtle, legal, necessary. The man goes about his days unaware that the ground beneath him is thinning. He mows his lawn. He chats with neighbors. He laughs at something on the television. Every ordinary moment feels surreal to those watching, knowing what the DNA says, knowing what the quiet lab report has already decided. An interview is planned. Carefully, strategically, no rush. They want to see him speak, to watch his reactions, to hear how he tells his story now, so many years after the night that never left this town. When the detectives sit across from him, the room feels smaller than it should. He looks tired, not suspicious. Calm, cooperative. He answers questions politely, almost helpfully. He remembers 1986 vaguely. Who wouldn't? It was a long time ago. He says he barely knew the victim. Says he was home that night. Says nothing unusual happened. His voice doesn't shake. His hands remain steady. Then the conversation shifts. They mention the evidence review, the advancements in forensic science, the DNA. They don't accuse. They don't threaten. They let the weight of the words settle naturally, like snow accumulating on a branch. At first, there's confusion, then a flicker of something else. Not panic, not denial, something quieter. Calculation. He asks questions now, specific ones. Too specific. How reliable is the test? How old was the sample? Could it have been contaminated? The detectives exchange glances. They've seen this before. Curiosity turning into concern, concern hardening into fear. When they tell him there's a match, his posture changes. It's subtle, but unmistakable. The calm fractures. He exhales slowly, as if bracing himself against a truth he's rehearsed denying for years. He doesn't confess. Not outright, but he doesn't ask why they're accusing him anymore. He knows. The interview ends without an arrest. Not yet. They need to tighten the net to make sure every step is solid, every piece admissible. The stakes are too high for shortcuts. A case this old can't afford a single misstep. News of a reopened cold case begins to leak. Not details, just whispers. The family hears first. A call from the sheriff's office, careful and measured, asking them to come in. They sit in the same building they sat in decades earlier, older now, carrying grief that never learned how to rest. When they hear the words DNA match, it feels unreal, like hearing a language they've waited their entire lives to understand. They cry. They ask questions. They grip each other's hands, as if afraid the moment might dissolve if they loosen their hold. For the first time in years, there is something resembling direction. Not closure. Not yet. But movement. The town senses it too. Conversations change tone. People speculate quietly, then louder. Names are floated, dismissed, floated again. When the suspect's name finally surfaces, it lands like a shockwave. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't someone passing through. This was one of theirs. Reactions split the community. Some refuse to believe it. They remember him as kind, dependable, incapable. Others replay old interactions in their minds, searching for signs they might have missed. Every smile, every awkward pause, every unexplained absence becomes suspicious in retrospect. As investigators prepare for the arrest, they revisit the crime scene, standing on that same gravel road, now altered by time, but unchanged in feeling. The fields are still there, the silence still heavy. They imagine the night as it was, trying to align the physical space with the story now forming clearly in their minds. The arrest happens quietly. No silence, no spectacle, just a knock on a door and a set of handcuffs closing around wrists that have been free for more than 30 years. The suspect doesn't resist. He looks resigned, as if some part of him has been waiting for this moment since 1986. When the news breaks publicly, it consumes the town. Headlines scream what people barely dare to say aloud. A Minnesota cold case solved. DNA match rocks, quiet farming town. Comme arrive. Microphones appear. The same gravel road is filmed from every angle, transformed into a symbol of delayed justice. The family speaks to reporters, voices trembling but firm. They talk about the years without answers, the birthdays missed, the holidays shadowed by absence. They talk about hope, fragile but persistent, and how it carried them even when logic said it shouldn't. The suspect's family stays silent. Their world has imploded in a different way, one they never consented to but must now navigate. Sympathy mixes uneasily with anger in the public eye. The town struggles to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the crime now attached to his name. As the case moves toward trial, investigators feel something unfamiliar. Not triumph, not satisfaction, something closer to vindication, tempered by regret. They know this won't bring the victim back. They know time stolen can't be returned. But they also know that truth matters, even when it arrives late. And beneath it all, there's a chilling realization that settles over the town like early frost. The killer didn't hide in the shadows. He didn't flee. He lived openly, comfortably for decades. The cold case wasn't cold because it lacked answers. It was cold because the answers were hiding in plain sight, waiting for science to catch up, waiting for time to betray the secret it had been guarding. As the courtroom lights prepare to turn on, and the story inches closer to its public reckoning, one question echoes through Minnesota's quiet fields, louder now than it ever was in 1986. How many other truths are buried just beneath the surface? And how long will they wait before they, too, demand to be heard? The courtroom fills slowly, not with noise, but with anticipation, the kind that hums just beneath the skin. Wooden benches creak under the weight of people who never expected to sit here, people who once waved to the accused from across a grocery aisle, people who shared fences, borrowed tools, trusted smiles. Now they avoid his eyes. Now they study the floor. A Minnesota cold case, once a ghost story whispered in kitchens, has taken physical form. Flesh, bone, a man in a suit, hands folded, jaw tight. The prosecutors arrive, carrying boxes. Evidence boxes, cardboard and plastic, unremarkable, yet heavy with decades of waiting. Inside them, the past has been labeled, cataloged, resealed, given a second life. The DNA report sits among them, crisp and modern, its language clinical and merciless. It doesn't speculate. It doesn't hesitate. It states facts, and those facts are enough to bend a room around them. When the judge enters, everyone rises, a reflex born of order, not emotion. The accused rises too. He looks smaller than he did in the interview room. Age has worked on him the way it works on all men, slowly hollowing out certainty. But there is still resistance in his eyes. Not innocence. Resistance. The refusal to surrender narrative control. The victim's family sits together in the front row. They have learned how to sit with pain, how to hold it without letting it spill outward. For them, this room is not about spectacle. It is about validation. Proof that the years of unanswered questions were not imagined. Proof that the silence had a source. Opening statements begin, and with them, the story reasserts itself. The prosecutor speaks plainly, methodically, but the words cut anyway. 1986, a quiet farming town. A life interrupted. A crime scene that never stopped speaking, even when no one could hear it. The defense listens carefully, already preparing their counters, their doubts, they're alternative explanations. The DNA evidence is introduced early, not as a climax, but as a foundation. The jury watches the expert witness explain processes that didn't exist when the murder occurred. Polymerase chain reactions, genetic markers, statistical certainty. Some jurors nod, others squint, try to anchor abstract science to human consequence. The expert is calm, precise, immune to drama. He doesn't need to convince. The numbers do that for him. When the defense rises, they attack not the result, but the time. They talk about degradation, contamination, chain of custody. 37 years is a long time. They argue, long enough for doubt to creep in, long enough for mistakes. They ask the jury to imagine how many hands touched the evidence, how many rooms it passed through, how many opportunities there were for error. The prosecutor counters with documentation, logs, signatures, dates, evidence lockers sealed and unsealed under protocol. The case may be old, but it was not sloppy. Not this time. Witnesses follow. Former investigators, their hair now gray, their voices steadier than their memories. They speak about the night of the murder, about procedures that were standard then, but archaic now. They admit limitations openly. They don't pretend they did everything right. They only testify to what they did and what they couldn't do without the tools they have today. Then come the townspeople, the neighbor who remembered the car, the coworker who recalled the tension. Their words are cautious, shaped by time and hindsight. The defense presses them hard. Memory is unreliable, they insist. Human recollection reshapes itself. What feels significant now may have been nothing then. But the jury listens, not just to the words, but to the tone, to the pauses, to the moments when witnesses admit uncertainty instead of filling it with confidence. Credibility grows in those gaps. The accused takes notes throughout. Sometimes he looks at the jury. Sometimes he stares straight ahead. When the prosecution presents a timeline that places him near the scene, his pen stops moving. His jaw tightens. It's small but visible. The kind of involuntary reaction that betrays effort. Outside the courtroom, the town holds its breath. Cafes lower their voices. Radios stay tuned to local news. People refresh headlines obsessively, watching their community become a national phrase. Minnesota, 1986 cold case solved. DNA match rocks, quiet farming town. It feels surreal, like seeing your own street on television after a disaster. The defense strategy becomes clear by the second week. They are not trying to prove innocence. They're trying to plant doubt. They suggest consensual contact, an explanation for the DNA that doesn't involve murder. They imply that the real killer may still be out there, untouched by this rush to closure. The prosecutor responds carefully, dismantling each suggestion without theatricality. Consent, they argue, doesn't explain the violence. It doesn't explain the location. It doesn't explain the timing. And it doesn't explain why the accused never came forward, never volunteered information that could have cleared him if his involvement was innocent. When the accused is called to testify, the room tightens. This is the moment everyone has been waiting for, though no one says it aloud. He takes the stand slowly, adjusting the microphone, clearing his throat. He tells his story with practiced restraint. He denies harming the victim, denies remembering the night clearly, denies intention. His answers are measured, almost rehearsed. Under cross-examination, cracks appear. The prosecutor circles gently at first, then closer. Why did you lie about your whereabouts that night? Why did you fail to mention your interaction with the victim? Why did you move away shortly after the murder? The accused hesitates. His answers become less precise. He deflects. He claims confusion. The prosecutor doesn't press harder than necessary. They let silence do the work. Let the jury sit with the inconsistencies. Let them feel the weight of what isn't being said. Closing arguments arrive like an exhale. The prosecution speaks of accountability, not vengeance, of science finally giving voice to evidence that never stopped existing. They remind the jury that time doesn't erase truth. It only delays it. The defense speaks of caution, of the danger of convicting a man based on evidence tested decades later, of the irreversible nature of judgment. They ask the jury to remember that doubt, however small, must favor the accused. The jury files out. Hours pass, then more hours. The town waits again, just as it has waited before, though this time the waiting feels different. Not empty, charged. When the verdict is announced, the room stands still. Guilty. The word lands without echo, without celebration. The victim's family closes their eyes. Some cry quietly. Others don't react at all, as if their bodies haven't caught up yet. The accused slumps. The resistance drains from his posture, leaving only age and consequence. He is led away, not as a symbol, not as a headline, but as a man who carried a secret longer than anyone knew. Sentencing will come later. Appeals will be filed. Legal processes will continue. But the core of the story has shifted. The cold case is no longer cold. It is resolved, at least in the eyes of the law. Outside, cameras flash. Reporters speak in urgent tones. The town exhales unevenly. Some feel relief. Others feel loss. Not for the victim, whose absence they've long mourned, but for the illusion of safety, the belief that monsters are always strangers. As night falls over the fields, lights glow in farmhouse windows. Life continues because it has to, but something fundamental has changed. The past has reached forward and demanded acknowledgement. And in doing so, it has left behind a question that will linger far longer than the verdict itself. If this truth could hide for 37 years, unseen, unspoken, living next door, what else is buried in the quiet places we trust the most? The sentence is handed down on a morning that feels ordinary, and that ordinariness is what makes it heavy. Outside the courthouse, frost clings to windshields and the breath of reporters hangs in the air like smoke, but inside the room the temperature is carefully controlled, neutral, indifferent. Years ago, the night of a murder was anything but controlled. It was chaotic, frantic, soaked in fear and confusion. Now, decades later, the law restores order with calm voices and measured words, as if the past can be folded neatly and placed on a shelf. The judge speaks without embellishment. He recites dates, charges, statutes. He references the jury's verdict as a fact, not a triumph. The sentence lands with a finality that does not feel cinematic. There is no gasp, no shouted objection, no collapse to the floor. Just the scrape of a chair, the shuffle of feet, the soft click of handcuffs closing around wrists that once carried secrets through town unnoticed. The victim's family listens, eyes forward. They have rehearsed this moment in their minds for years. Imagine what it would feel like to hear consequences finally articulated. The reality is quieter, more complicated. Justice, it turns out, does not erase grief. It does not rewind memory. It simply acknowledges, officially, that something wrong happened and that someone is responsible. For them, that acknowledgement is both a relief and a reminder of everything that was lost while waiting for it. As the accused is led away, cameras capture the last image the public will see of him. Head lowered, shoulders rounded, a man reduced to a single identity after decades of anonymity. For the town, this image will circulate endlessly, replayed on local news, shared online, frozen into a symbol. But for those who knew him before the arrest, the image clashes violently with memory. The neighbor who once lent him equipment, the co-worker who shared lunches, the friend who trusted him around family. They are left reconciling two versions of the same person, neither of which fully makes sense anymore. The case file closes, at least officially. The cold case designation is removed. Solved. The word is clean, decisive, but it doesn't capture the aftermath. It doesn't describe the way the town continues to process what it has learned, or how conversations shift in grocery store aisles and church basements. There is a new caution now, an awareness that quiet does not mean safe, that familiarity does not equal innocence. Investigators give interviews in the days that follow. They talk about persistence, about technology finally catching up with evidence that never stopped waiting. They emphasize procedure, the importance of revisiting old cases with new eyes. But beneath their professional language is something more personal. Regret. They wonder aloud what might have been different if the tools they have now had existed then. How many years of freedom would have been taken away from the perpetrator sooner? How many years of uncertainty could have been spared for the victim's family? The DNA lab becomes a focal point in these stories, a modern shrine to precision and probability. Reporters describe it in reverent detail: sterile rooms, humming machines, analysts in gloves and masks. It sounds almost futuristic, a stark contrast to the grainy photographs from the original investigation, where evidence was handled with care but limited understanding. The contrast reinforces a sobering truth. Justice is not static. It evolves unevenly, sometimes too slowly to matter when it matters most. In the town itself, life resumes its routines, but they feel altered. Children go to school. Farmers tend their fields. Snowplows scrape roads clean in the early mornings. Yet beneath these rhythms is a subtle tension, an undercurrent of awareness. People lock doors more carefully. They look at one another longer. They revisit old memories, asking themselves if there were signs they missed, moments that now feel charged with new meaning. For some, the case opens wounds they thought had healed. Other unsolved incidents resurface in conversation. Old rumors gain traction. The past feels less settled, more porous. The idea that truth can remain hidden for decades forces a reckoning with the fragility of certainty. If this could happen here, people ask, where else has it happened? The victim's story, once overshadowed by mystery, begins to be told more fully. Not just how she died, but how she lived. Friends speak about her laugh, her plans, her unfinished dreams. These details, absent from headlines for years, finally take center stage. The case was never just about identifying a killer. It was about restoring humanity to someone who had been reduced to a question mark. Memorials are revisited. Flowers appear where none have been placed in years. The family gathers privately, not to celebrate, but to mark an end to waiting. They talk about what comes next, a conversation they never thought they would have. Closure is not a door that slams shut. It is a gradual easing, a permission to move forward without the constant pull of unanswered questions. Meanwhile, legal analysts debate the implications of the case. They talk about precedent, about the reliability of decades-old evidence, about the balance between scientific advancement and due process. Some praise the outcome as a triumph of modern forensics. Others caution against over-reliance on technology, reminding audiences that DNA, while powerful, is only one piece of a larger puzzle. The accused appeals begin quietly. Paperwork filed, arguments prepared. The machinery of the justice system continues to turn, methodical and relentless. The possibility of future hearings lingers, a reminder that even after a verdict, nothing is ever truly final. For the family, this prospect is exhausting. For the town, it is unsettling. The case may be solved, but its shadow remains. Years from now, the story will be retold in different forms. Podcasts will dissect it. Documentaries will reconstruct it with moody lighting and dramatic narration. The cold case will become content, its edges smoothed for consumption. But for those who lived through it, who waded through decades of silence, the story resists simplification. It is messy, painful, unresolved in ways that no verdict can fix. Late one evening, long after the cameras have left, the town settles into a rare stillness. The fields stretch out under a pale sky, unchanged by human drama. The houses stand where they always have, their windows glowing softly. Somewhere inside one of them, a family sleeps, knowing that the question that haunted them for most of their lives finally has an answer. Somewhere else, someone lies awake, grappling with the realization that the familiar can conceal the unimaginable. The Minnesota 1986 cold case is no longer a mystery in the legal sense. Its files are complete, its evidence archived, its perpetrator identified and punished. But its emotional residue lingers, woven into the fabric of the community. It serves as a reminder that time does not heal all wounds on its own. Sometimes it simply waits, preserving pain until the moment truth forces it back into the light. And as the town moves forward, carrying both relief and unease, one thought echoes quietly through conversations and reflections alike. Justice may arrive late, carried on the back of science and persistence, but when it does, it asks something of everyone who receives it: to remember, to reckon, and to accept that the past, no matter how deeply buried, is never truly gone. Time moves differently after a verdict. Days stretch, not because anything dramatic happens, but because the absence of suspense feels unfamiliar. For nearly 4 decades, the case existed as a question, a constant hum in the background of life in the farming town. Now the question has an answer, and the silence it leaves behind is heavier than the noise ever was. People wake up expecting the same unresolved ache, only to realize it has shifted into something harder to name. The courthouse empties, but the story does not. It spills into kitchens and workshops, into late-night conversations between spouses who once assumed they knew everything about the people around them. The name of the convicted man is spoken carefully, often followed by a pause. No one wants to say it too loudly, as if volume might give the past permission to repeat itself. His house stands locked and dark, blinds drawn, lawn untouched. It becomes a landmark of discomfort, a physical reminder that evil does not always announce itself. Law enforcement holds a final press briefing, not because there is new information, but because the public demands ritual. The sheriff speaks of closure again, the word worn thin by repetition. He acknowledges the role of DNA, but he also speaks about patience, about the detectives who refused to let the case die even when budgets tightened and priorities shifted. He does not mention the sleepless nights, the boxes of evidence moved from shelf to shelf, the quiet fear that the truth might never surface. Those details are left between the lines. In the weeks that follow, letters arrive at the station. Some are expressions of gratitude, handwritten notes thanking investigators for not giving up. Others are darker, filled with anger and disbelief. A few defend the convicted man, insisting that no science can rewrite the memories they have of him. These letters are filed away, evidence of another kind, proof that justice does not create consensus. It creates fracture. The victim's family retreats from public view. Their faces have been everywhere, and now they need distance. They sort through old belongings, items kept for decades because letting go felt like betrayal. A jacket still carrying her scent. Photographs curled at the edges. Notes written in a familiar hand. Each object carries weight, and yet, for the first time, the weight is not compounded by uncertainty. They can grieve without asking who, without imagining endless possibilities. The grief is still sharp, but it is singular, focused. At the cemetery, the grave marker is cleaned, flowers replaced. The family stands together, not speaking much. Words feel inadequate. There is no speech that can bridge the years stolen or the life interrupted. Instead, they share presence. The simple fact of standing there without unanswered questions feels radical, almost unreal. For decades, the grave was a symbol of unfinished business. Now it is something closer to what it should have been all along. A place of remembrance, not investigation. Elsewhere in town, the impact continues to ripple. A retired teacher recalls having both the victim and the perpetrator pass through her classroom years apart. She replays interactions in her mind, searching for signs she could not have known to look for. A former coworker remembers jokes told, complaints shared, moments of camaraderie that now feel tainted. Memory becomes suspect. People learn that recollection is not fixed. It bends under new information, reshaping itself whether invited or not. True crime producers begin reaching out, sensing a story with all the elements audiences crave. Cold case, DNA, small town, shocking reveal. Some residents are eager to talk, drawn by the idea that telling the story might help others. Others bristle at the thought of their pain becoming entertainment. The line between awareness and exploitation feels dangerously thin. The family declines most requests. They have waited long enough. They do not owe anyone access to their grief. In academic circles, the case is cited as an example of forensic persistence. Conferences include slides detailing the evidence chain, the preservation methods that allowed biological material to survive decades intact. Experts praise the foresight of investigators who, even without modern tools, stored evidence with the future in mind. It becomes a teaching case, stripped of names, reduced to processes and outcomes. In these rooms, the emotional cost fades into the background, overshadowed by technique. The convicted man begins his life behind bars quietly. Intake, processing, the routine indignities of incarceration. His world shrinks to concrete and schedules. He is no longer a neighbor or a coworker. He is an inmate number, a case file, a cautionary tale. Yet even here, the past intrudes. Other inmates recognize him from the news. Some are curious. Some are hostile. The notoriety he never sought now follows him relentlessly. Appeals are filed, as expected. Arguments focus on the age of the evidence, the possibility of contamination, the reliability of witnesses recalling events from so long ago. Legal briefs dissect moments that, to the family, feel settled. Each filing reopens the wound slightly, reminding them that certainty in the courtroom does not always translate to finality in reality. The law moves slowly, and patience is a resource already spent. In town, younger generations learn the story almost as folklore. They hear it from parents and teachers, framed as a lesson about vigilance, about the importance of speaking up, about the power of science. For them, the case is history, something that happened before they were born. They cannot fully grasp what it was like to live under the weight of an unanswered crime. They only know the resolution, not the waiting. The old police station archives are reorganized. Boxes once labeled unsolved are reviewed, their contents examined with renewed interest. The Minnesota case becomes a catalyst. If this one could be solved, maybe others can too. Detectives feel a cautious optimism, tempered by realism. Not every case will have preserved DNA. Not every mystery will yield to time. But hope, once rekindled, is hard to extinguish. Late at night, a retired detective sits alone, listening to the radio crackle softly. He was young when the case began, older when it finally ended. It followed him through promotions, through family milestones, through moments of doubt. He thinks about the victim, about her family, about the man now in prison. He wonders how many choices, small and large, led to this outcome. He knows better than to believe in neat narratives. Reality is messier. Always has been. The town holds a community meeting months later, framed as a discussion about healing. Attendance is high, but the mood is subdued. People share cautiously. Some talk about relief. Others talk about anger, about the years of fear and suspicion. One voice trembles as it asks why it took so long. There is no satisfying answer. Technology, resources, human limitation. The reasons stack up, none of them sufficient. A counselor speaks about trauma, about how unresolved violence can embed itself in a community's identity. She explains that closure is not a switch, but a process. That even solved cases can leave scars. Her words resonate. Heads nod. The meeting ends without applause, but with a shared understanding that healing will not be immediate or uniform. Winter deepens. Snow blankets the fields, muting sound, creating a landscape that looks deceptively peaceful. The same fields existed in 1986, unchanged witnesses to what happened. They have outlasted secrets, outlasted denial, outlasted silence. Nature, indifferent and enduring, offers no commentary on justice. It simply persists. In one quiet house, the victim's family gathers for a holiday for the first time without the looming shadow of the unknown. There's laughter, tentative at first, then more natural. Her absence is still felt, but it is no longer paired with relentless questions. They speak her name freely, without the weight of speculation. It feels like reclaiming something that was stolen long ago. The Minnesota 1986 cold case is officially closed, but its legacy is still unfolding. It has altered how a town sees itself, how investigators approach their work, how families understand endurance. It has proven that time can be both an enemy and an ally, that truth can survive neglect, waiting patiently for the moment it is finally heard. As months turn into years, the headlines fade. New cases capture attention. The story becomes less urgent, more reflective. But for those who lived it, who carried it through decades of uncertainty, the resolution remains a defining marker, not because it fixed everything, but because it acknowledged something fundamental, that the past matters, that persistence has value, and that even in the quietest places, the truth, once uncovered, changes everything it touches. There is a strange afterlife to a solved cold case, a period where the facts are settled, but the meaning is not. In Minnesota, the farming town learns this slowly, day by day, as the shock gives way to something more complex. Relief mixes with guilt. Certainty collides with memory. People begin to ask questions they never dared to ask when the case was unsolved, questions that feel almost dangerous now that answers exist. The local newspaper runs a long-form piece weeks after the sentencing. No screaming headline this time, just dense columns of text, timelines reconstructed with forensic precision. The article traces the victim's final hours, the investigation's early missteps, the technological limitations of the late 80s. It quotes detectives who have since retired, voices older, more measured, stripped of the bravado they once carried. Reading it feels like reopening a sealed room. Necessary, but unsettling. Some residents read it cover to cover. Others can't finish. They stop at the photograph of the victim, young and unaware of what history will do with her face. The paper lands on kitchen tables across town, folded, unfolded, left open like a wound that refuses to close neatly. For decades, speculation filled the gaps. Now facts do. And facts, it turns out, are heavier. The school district quietly updates its curriculum. In a criminal justice elective, the case is discussed as a lesson in forensic evolution. Teachers are careful with their language. They avoid names at first, focus on process, on how evidence once thought useless became decisive. Students listen with a mix of fascination and detachment. For them, it is almost abstract. A story from before smartphones, before social media, before constant surveillance. They struggle to imagine a world where someone could disappear into anonymity so completely. Outside the classroom, the town's older residents grapple with a different reality. They remember the night patrol cars lined the streets, the whispers at church, the curfews imposed out of fear rather than law. They remember suspects who were never charged, people who moved away under a cloud of suspicion. Now, some of those people reach out, cautiously, asking if the truth has finally cleared their names. In some cases, it has. In others, the damage is already done. One man, long suspected because he lived near the crime scene, finally speaks publicly. He appears in a short interview, voice steady but eyes tired. He talks about lost friendships, about the way neighbors crossed the street to avoid him. He does not ask for sympathy. He simply states the facts of his life, as shaped by a crime he did not commit. His words hang in the air, a reminder that unresolved cases do not just haunt victims' families. They cast shadows far wider. The sheriff's department feels the weight of this realization. Internally, there's pride, yes, but also reflection. Meetings are held about transparency, about how to balance investigation with the potential harm of suspicion. Younger officers listen to veterans describe the pressure of needing answers when none were available. They learn that certainty is a luxury and humility a necessity. The solved case becomes a mirror, showing both progress and past flaws. National attention resurfaces briefly when a true crime documentary releases an episode centered on the Minnesota case. The production is slick, dramatic, heavy on ominous music. Interviews are edited for tension. The DNA breakthrough is framed as a miracle, a sudden lightning strike of justice. Some viewers praise it. Others criticize it for oversimplifying decades of work and pain. The family watches once, then turns it off. They do not need dramatization. They lived the long version. The victim's siblings navigate a complicated emotional terrain. On one hand, they feel vindicated. On the other, they feel exposed. Their private loss is now public property, dissected by strangers online. Comments range from compassionate to cruel. Some ask why it took so long. Others speculate about motives, about moments that were never documented. The siblings learn quickly that the internet does not distinguish between curiosity and intrusion. They seek counseling, something that was rarely discussed openly in 1986. The therapist listens as they talk about frozen grief, about how mourning was suspended for decades, waiting for answers. She explains that resolution can reopen emotions long suppressed. That closure does not mean forgetting. It means integrating the truth into a life already shaped by absence. The sessions are difficult but grounding. For the first time, their grief has a clear shape. Meanwhile, the convicted man's past is being re-examined by journalists and armchair detectives alike. Old acquaintances are tracked down. Patterns are retroactively imposed on behaviors that once seemed ordinary. A temper, a sudden move, an argument remembered differently now that its context has shifted. This retroactive clarity is seductive. It makes chaos feel orderly. But those closest to the investigation know the truth is less cinematic. The signs were subtle, ambiguous, easily missed. In prison, the man maintains his innocence publicly, even as DNA evidence anchors him to the crime. He files handwritten motions, letters filled with legal language learned late in life. Guards observe him carefully, aware of his notoriety. Other inmates test him, some out of curiosity, others out of cruelty. His world has narrowed, but his mind seems restless, cycling through versions of the past where things might have gone differently. Back in Minnesota, the physical landscape remains unchanged. Fields stretch toward the horizon, indifferent to human drama. The road where the victim was last seen is repaved, its surface smooth, erasing tire marks long vanished. People drive it daily without thinking, yet for some, every mile carries memory. They slow unconsciously, as if the land itself might still whisper something important. The case inspires renewed interest in other unsolved crimes across the state. Cold case units receive calls from families who have waited just as long, voices trembling with cautious hope. Detectives temper expectations, explaining that DNA is not always available. That time can degrade evidence beyond use. Still, the Minnesota case has shifted the emotional equation. Hope, once considered naive, now feels justified. At a statewide law enforcement conference, the case is presented in detail. Slides show evidence bags dated decades apart, lab reports old and new. Speakers emphasize preservation, chain of custody, the importance of resisting the urge to discard useless material. The room is quiet, attentive. Everyone understands what is at stake. Not just convictions, but trust, the belief that persistence matters. The victim's name is etched into a memorial wall at a local park, added years ago when the case was still unsolved. Families gather there annually, a small ritual of remembrance. This year feels different. There's still sorrow, but also a sense of completion. Candles flicker in the evening air, reflections dancing on polished stone. Someone reads a short poem about time and truth. No one rushes to leave. As the seasons turn, the town settles into a new normal. The case is no longer the first thing mentioned to outsiders, but it remains part of the town's identity. It has become a reference point, a before and after marker. Conversations about safety, about justice, about technology all circle back to it. The past has been recontextualized, not erased. Late one night, a detective reviews the closed file one last time. He flips through pages filled with notes from officers who are no longer alive, handwriting faded but legible. He feels a strange connection across time, a sense of continuity. The case began before his career and ended well into it. It has taught him patience, humility, and the sobering truth that justice often arrives late, if at all. He closes the file gently, places it on the shelf marked resolved. the label feels almost fragile. Because resolution does not mean an ending. It means a transformation. The Minnesota 1986 cold case has shifted from a question to a story, from an open wound to a scar. And like all scars, it remains sensitive, a reminder of what happened, and of what it took, finally, to bring the truth into the light. Tom does not stop paying interest on a crime, even after the verdict is read aloud. In Minnesota, the solved cold case continues to ripple outward, touching places no one anticipated, awakening memories that had learned how to sleep lightly. The town carries on, but it does so with a new posture, shoulders slightly tense, as if listening for an echo that might return without warning. The courthouse empties, the cameras disappear, and the quiet returns in stages. First, the obvious noise fades, the reporters, the vans, the whispered conversations in hallways. Then the subtler sounds follow. The phones ring less often. Emails slow. The case, once a daily presence, becomes something people refer to in the past tense. Yet even in silence, it speaks. In the evidence room, a technician catalogs the final transfers. Items once labeled unknown are reclassified, sealed with fresh dates. The smell of cardboard and latex gloves fills the air. This room has seen thousands of stories pass through, most of them unfinished. The Minnesota file now rests among the rare few that reached a conclusion. The technician pauses, hand hovering over the box, aware that this cardboard container once held decades of unanswered questions. Now it holds certainty, or something close to it. Across town, the victim's childhood home stands unchanged. The paint has faded. The mailbox leans slightly to the right. New owners live there now, unaware of every detail but conscious enough to feel the weight. They were told, before signing the papers, that something terrible once happened in the orbit of this place. They accepted anyway, believing time had done its work. On some nights, they swear the house feels heavier, as if memory itself has mass. The victim's mother's voice, preserved on old answering machine tapes, is digitized by a local historian. She had left messages years ago, asking for updates, pleading politely, always politely. Her voice is calm, controlled, as if fear might anger whoever was listening on the other end. She passed away before the case was solved. When the recordings are played back now, there is a hush in the room. The messages sound like signals sent into space, finally answered long after the sender is gone. This realization sharpens the town's grief. Justice arrived, but it arrived late. Too late for some. That fact becomes part of the narrative, an uncomfortable footnote that refuses to stay small. The solved cold case is not a triumphant ending. It is a complicated one. It forces people to confront not only what happened, but when it happened, and what that delay cost. In a diner near the edge of town, regulars argue softly over coffee. One insists the system worked, that patience was rewarded. Another shakes his head, pointing out the years lost, the lives warped by uncertainty. The waitress refills cups without comment. She remembers serving detectives in this same booth decades ago, their faces drawn, their conversations hushed. Back then, the future felt wide open. Now it feels precise, defined by what cannot be undone. The prosecutor receives letters from families of other victims, written in careful handwriting. They ask how to keep hope alive, how to survive the waiting. The prosecutor reads each one, knowing there is no template for reassurance. She replies honestly, explaining the limits, the odds, the small victories that accumulate quietly in labs and archives. She does not promise miracles. She offers persistence. Sometimes that is enough to keep someone breathing through another year. The case also reaches academic circles. Criminology journals publish analyses dissecting the investigative arc charts, illustrate advances in DNA sequencing, policy shifts in evidence retention. Footnotes cite the Minnesota case as an example of latent resolution. The language is clinical, detached, but beneath it lies awe. A crime frozen in time was finally thawed, revealing its shape with chilling clarity. Yet the academic distance feels strange to those who lived it. For them, this was never a case study. It was a presence, a constant, a shadow cast across holidays, graduations, funerals. Turning it into data feels necessary, but also slightly cruel, as if something sacred is being measured with calipers. The convicted man's family experiences a parallel isolation. Some move away quietly. Others stay, rooted by work or obligation. They endure glances, whispers, the sudden stiffness in conversations when their last name is mentioned. They did not commit the crime, yet they carry its residue. In private moments, they ask themselves questions they never asked before. Were there signs? Did they miss something? The answers do not come easily, if at all. In the state crime lab, technicians revisit other old samples with renewed urgency. The Minnesota breakthrough has changed the mood. Where there was once resignation, there is now cautious optimism. Shelves once considered archives of failure are reimagined as reservoirs of potential. Each vial, each envelope could be waiting for the right moment, the right technology, the right set of circumstances to speak. Late at night, a detective drives the back roads alone, retracing the path described in witness statements decades old. The darkness feels thicker here, the kind that swallows headlights rather than reflecting them. He slows near the spot where the victim was last seen alive. There is nothing to mark it now. No sign, no plaque, just asphalt and grass. He imagines the scene as it once was, then forces himself to return to the present. The imagination can be dangerous in this line of work. The town council debates whether to install a memorial sign. Some argue it would honor the victim. Others fear it would reopen wounds, define the town by its darkest moment. The debate is respectful, subdued. In the end, they decide against it. Memory, they conclude, does not need signage. It lives where it lives. On the anniversary of the arrest, a small group gathers at the local library for a panel discussion. Retired officers, forensic scientists, and community members sit together, answering questions. There is no spectacle, no applause, just conversation. Someone asks what kept them going when the case felt impossible. A retired detective answers without hesitation. The idea that the truth doesn't expire, he says. The room absorbs this quietly. Outside, snow begins to fall, softening edges, muting sound. Minnesota winters have always been unforgiving, but they are also precise. They preserve, they hold. As snow covers the ground, it hides imperfections, but it also keeps them intact beneath the surface. When spring comes, everything reemerges, unchanged by the illusion of erasure. The victim's name is spoken less frequently now, but when it is, it carries a different tone. Less question, more statement. She is no longer the center of speculation. She is a person whose story has been told, however belatedly. That shift matters. It restores a measure of dignity that had been suspended in uncertainty. In a quiet moment, a journalist who covered the case from the beginning rereads his earliest notes. They are messy, speculative, filled with question marks. He compares them to his final article, precise and restrained. The contrast is stark. He realizes that his own career has been shaped by this one story, that it taught him patience, skepticism, and the danger of narrative shortcuts. Not all truths reveal themselves on deadline. As the year draws to a close, the town prepares for the holidays. Lights go up. Stores decorate windows. Life asserts itself, as it always does. But beneath the routine, there's a shared understanding now. Evil did not vanish. It was identified, named, confronted. That knowledge does not make the world safe, but it makes it clearer. The Minnesota 1986 cold case no longer hangs unanswered in the air, but it has not dissolved. It has settled into the soil, into the collective memory, into the way people here understand time and justice. It reminds them that the past is never really past. It waits, and sometimes, if patience holds and truth is stubborn enough, it speaks. The months after resolution carry a strange aftertaste. Not relief exactly, not sorrow alone, but something suspended between them, a quiet hum that follows people into ordinary moments. In Minnesota, the cold case has been solved on paper, sealed in court records, archived in databases, But in lived reality, it continues to move, threading itself through routines that once felt untouched. The story has shifted from mystery to memory, and memory behaves differently. It doesn't ask permission. It intrudes. In the early mornings, farmers drive their trucks down frost-lined roads, radio murmuring news that no longer mentions the case. The silence feels deliberate, as if the world has agreed to move on. Yet each mile marker, each bend in the road, still carries associations. This was the route the search teams took. This ditch was checked twice. This field was walked shoulder to shoulder, boots sinking into mud that seemed endless at the time. Solved or not, the land remembers. At the sheriff's office, a younger deputy studies the case file during training, flipping through scanned photographs and yellowed reports. To him, it is history, a lesson in persistence and forensic evolution. He pauses at a crime scene photo, grainy and stark, and imagines what it must have felt like to stand there in 1986 with nothing but instinct and limited tools. The realization unsettles him. Technology changes, but uncertainty doesn't vanish. It only waits for a different form. The deputy's instructor emphasizes one point repeatedly. Never assume a case is truly cold, only dormant. The words land with weight, shaped by the Minnesota experience. A case can sleep for decades, but it never stops existing. It breathes quietly, waiting for someone to listen closely enough. Elsewhere, the victim's siblings gather for a private remembrance. No cameras, no statements, just family. They share stories not of the crime, but of childhood moments that have been overshadowed for years. Laughter surfaces cautiously at first, then more freely. It feels almost rebellious, as if joy might be mistaken for forgetting. But forgetting is no longer the fear. Oblivion has been replaced by clarity. They know now what they didn't know before. That knowledge hurts, but it also anchors them. One sibling admits something she has never said out loud. She stopped imagining alternate endings once the arrest was made. For years, she had replayed scenarios, hoping for survival, escape, miracle. Now those doors are closed. The imagination, once a refuge, has been sealed. The truth is final. The group sits with that admission, understanding that certainty brings its own kind of grief. In town, a local high school invites a forensic scientist to speak to students. DNA analysis, genetic genealogy, cold case breakthroughs. The lecture is polished, inspiring. Slides flash images of lab equipment and flowcharts. A student asks whether science always wins in the end. The scientist hesitates before answering. No, she says. Science gives us chances. What we do with them determines the outcome. The Minnesota case is cited as an example of patience meeting opportunity, not inevitability. After the talk, a student lingers, eyes fixed on the screen where the word cold case still glows faintly. He lives 2 streets away from where the victim once lived. He had grown up hearing whispers, sensing something unspoken. Now, the whispers have context. He walks home differently that afternoon, aware that history can live quietly beside you, unnoticed until it suddenly demands attention. In the evenings, the town's lone bar fills with subdued conversation. The case comes up less frequently now, but when it does, the tone is reflective rather than speculative. People talk about where they were when the arrest was announced, how they heard the news. It has become a reference point, a shared timestamp. Before the DNA match. After the DNA match. Time has been redefined around it. A retired investigator, now in his 70s, sits alone at the end of the bar, nursing a drink he barely touches. He spent years on the case, years that bled into his personal life, eroding relationships, shaping his identity. He once believed solving it would bring peace. Instead, it brought a quiet reckoning. He wonders who he is without the pursuit. The case had given his career a through line. Now that line has ended. At home, he opens a box he hasn't touched in decades. Inside are notebooks, personal reflections he never submitted as evidence, observations, doubts, hunches that went nowhere. He reads them slowly, recognizing his younger self in the urgency of the handwriting. He doesn't regret the years spent. but he feels their weight now, heavier without the adrenaline of uncertainty. The convicted man's cell becomes a focal point of media curiosity briefly before interest fades. He gives no interviews. His silence is interpreted in countless ways. Remorse, defiance, resignation. The truth remains inaccessible, locked behind institutional walls and personal refusal. For the community, his inner life matters less than the fact of accountability. Still, the unanswered questions linger like static. In a courthouse basement, evidence technicians finalize the long-term storage plan. Certain items will be retained indefinitely, others destroyed according to protocol. The act of deciding what to keep and what to discard feels strangely symbolic. Which fragments of the past deserve permanence? Which should be released? The technicians follow policy, but the emotional calculus is impossible to ignore. One box is marked "Do Not Destroy." Inside are the biological samples that made the breakthrough possible. They're no longer just evidence. They are proof of concept, proof that time does not always win. The box is placed on a shelf with others like it, quiet sentinels of future possibility. Outside, winter tightens its grip. Snowstorms roll in, erasing tracks, rewriting the surface of the landscape again and again. The town adapts, as it always has, shoveling driveways, clearing roads. Beneath the snow, the ground remains unchanged, holding everything it has ever absorbed. The metaphor is not lost on those who think about such things. A local journalist begins work on a long-form piece, not about the crime itself, but about the aftermath of resolution. She interviews residents who never spoke before, people who stayed silent out of respect or fear or exhaustion. Their stories reveal a different dimension of the case, one not captured in police reports or court transcripts. The psychological toll of waiting. The quiet calculations people made about safety, trust, and belonging. One interviewee admits she stopped letting her children walk alone after dark, even years later. Another says he avoided a particular stretch of road for decades, never consciously acknowledging why. These habits persisted long after the danger had passed, shaped by an unresolved narrative that settled into muscle memory. Solving the case does not erase those habits. It simply illuminates their origin. The journalist struggles with how to frame the piece. Resolution is supposed to be clean, celebratory. But this story resists that simplicity. It is about closure that feels incomplete, about answers that arrive too late to restore what was lost. She decides to let the contradiction stand. The truth, she realizes, is not tidy. At a community meeting, a counselor speaks about collective trauma. She explains how unresolved events can imprint on a population, influencing behavior across generations. The Minnesota cold case, she says, function like an open loop. Its closure allows for healing, but healing is not automatic. It requires acknowledgement, patience, and time. The room listens quietly, recognizing themselves in her words. Late one night, the victim's name appears in a database update, cross-referenced with solved cases. The digital marker changes status. Unsolved becomes solved. The shift is instantaneous, almost trivial in appearance. But behind that single word lies decades of human effort, loss, and persistence. The system does not record those layers. It simply updates. And yet, somewhere between the code and the consciousness, the meaning settles. The Minnesota 1986 cold case is no longer question mark. It is a statement, a reminder that truth can surface long after hope has thinned, that silence can be broken by a whisper from the past, amplified by science and stubborn resolve. As spring approaches, the snow begins to recede, revealing fields once hidden. The land looks the same as it always has, but those who know, know. Beneath the thawed surface lies a story that refused to stay buried. And in that refusal, there is something both unsettling and profound. The past does not disappear. It waits, and when it rises, it changes everything that follows. By the time spring fully arrives, the case has slipped from headlines into footnotes, but its gravity hasn't lessened. It has simply redistributed itself, spreading through conversations that start on other topics and end, inevitably, with a pause. People talk about crops, weather, school schedules, and then there's that moment where someone exhales and says almost reflexively, "I still can't believe it." The words don't need context anymore. Everyone knows what they refer to. The solved cold case has become a shared undercurrent, a reference point that doesn't announce itself, but is always present. In a courthouse, the file rests on a shelf labeled closed, the letters stamped in a red ink that once symbolized finality. Now it feels provisional, like a decision made by humans trying to impose order on something larger. Clerks pass by it daily, no longer slowing their steps. Routine returns quickly in institutional spaces. Yet even there, the case leaves a residue. A new protocol memo circulates, urging periodic reviews of old evidence, emphasizing preservation, chain of custody, and interagency cooperation. The language is clinical, but the subtext is unmistakable. This happened once. It can happen again. At the state lab, technicians run tests on other dormant samples, their confidence buoyed by recent success. The Minnesota breakthrough has become a case study, cited in meetings and training sessions. Not as a miracle, but as a model. Persistence over spectacle. Method over momentum. The lab hums with renewed purpose, a quiet optimism that doesn't announce itself, but changes the way people approach their benches. One technician admits she dreams differently now. For years, her work felt abstract, numbers and sequences divorced from outcomes she would never see. After the cold case resolution, faces have entered her dreams. Not victims she knew, but imagined families receiving phone calls, imagined moments of stunned silence. The dreams don't frighten her. They remind her why precision matters. Back in the town, a house on the edge of a gravel road is put up for sale. It has no direct connection to the crime, but rumors once brushed against it unfairly, persistently. The owners had lived with that shadow for decades, neighbors' glances lingering a second too long. Now, with the case resolved, the shadow lifts. Prospective buyers walk through the rooms without hesitation, unaware of the history that once made this address feel heavy. The sale goes through quickly. A quiet victory, unrecorded. At the local library, an archivist updates the community history display. A small plaque is added beneath a photograph from the 1980s. The wording is careful, factual, restrained. It mentions the year, the loss, the resolution. Nothing more. No adjectives. No speculation. The archivist understands the power of restraint. The story is strong enough without embellishment. Visitors pause at the display, some longer than others. An elderly man stands there one afternoon, hat in hand, eyes fixed on the photograph. He remembers the day it was taken, remembers the mood in town then, the tension that settled like fog. He whispers something under his breath, a sentence unfinished, and moves on. Closure does not require an audience. In a classroom across town, a teacher assigns a project on local history. Students are encouraged to choose events that shaped their community. Several pick the cold case, drawn by its dramatic arc and recent resolution. They interview relatives, gather clippings, watch old news footage. For them, the case is both distant and immediate, a bridge between generations. They present their findings with earnest seriousness, learning not just about crime and science, but about patience, about how long truth can take to arrive. One student struggles with a question that won't leave her. If the evidence had been tested earlier, would the outcome have changed? Her teacher answers honestly. Maybe. Probably. The admission hangs in the room, heavy but instructive. Progress is not retroactive. It moves forward, carrying lessons carved from regret. In the evenings, the victim's name appears less frequently in conversation, but when it does, it is spoken with a steadiness that wasn't possible before. There is no longer a tremor of uncertainty, no speculative edge. The story has boundaries now, even if they are imperfect. That alone changes its texture. A podcast producer reaches out to the family, requesting an interview. They decline politely, not out of bitterness, but out of fatigue. They have told the story enough times to enough strangers. The resolution did not restore their appetite for public exposure. It sharpened their desire for privacy. Their refusal is respected, a rare courtesy in a media landscape that often mistakes access for entitlement. Meanwhile, online forums dissect the case with renewed intensity, fueled by the finality of conviction. Armchair detectives revisit old theories, some abandoning them reluctantly, others clinging stubbornly. The internet, unlike communities, struggles with closure. It thrives on questions. The solved cold case disrupts that economy, leaving some participants dissatisfied. They look for cracks, inconsistencies, anything to keep the narrative open. But the facts hold. In a neighboring county, an investigator reads about the Minnesota case late at night, the glow of his laptop illuminating a desk cluttered with files from his own unsolved cases. He feels a familiar mix of hope and pressure. Hope that answers are possible. Pressure to deliver them. The success elsewhere raises expectations everywhere. He closes his laptop and stares at the wall, imagining future phone calls he might have to make. The convicted man's family navigates their own aftermath, mostly unseen. Their lives have been upended in a different way, marked by disbelief, anger, shame. Some cut ties completely. Others struggle to reconcile the person they knew with the evidence now undeniable. They receive little sympathy, and they do not expect it. Their grief is complicated, unwelcome in public discourse, but no less real. A counselor who works with families affected by crime describes this phase as the echo period. The initial impact has passed, but reverberations continue, unpredictable and uneven. People think they're finished processing, only to be blindsided by a memory, a smell, a headline that triggers something dormant. The counselor reminds her clients that resolution does not mean erasure. It means integration. On the anniversary of the crime, there is no official memorial this year. No speeches. No candes. The absence feels intentional, respectful. Those who wish to remember do so privately. Some drive to quiet places. Others sit at kitchen tables with old photographs. The day passes without incident, marked only by an awareness shared by those who have carried it for decades. At dusk, a light rain falls over the fields, darkening the soil. The land absorbs it easily, as it has absorbed so much else. Rain has always been part of this story. Rain during searches, rain during vigils, rain during arrests. It feels fitting that it continues, indifferent yet present. In the sheriff's office, a new cold case unit proposal is drafted, inspired in part by the recent success. It outlines staffing needs, training, partnerships with state labs. The budget is modest. The ambition is not. The proposal frames cold cases not as relics, but as opportunities. The language is careful, hopeful without being naive. A county commissioner reads the proposal and nods slowly. She remembers the years when the case cast a long shadow over her constituents. She understands the political risk of investing in the past, but she also understands the cost of neglect. She makes a note to support it. Late one night, the retired investigator returns to the fields alone. He parks his truck and steps out, listening to the wind move through the grass. The place no longer feels charged, but it is not neutral either. He thinks about the young officers who will come after him, armed with tools he never had. He hopes they will also carry the patience he learned the hard way. He stands there for a long time, not searching, not remembering actively, just being present. When he leaves, he does not look back. It feels unnecessary now. The Minnesota 1986 cold case has settled into its final form, not as a story with a neat ending, but as a chapter that reshaped everything around it. It altered practices, relationships, expectations. It taught a community that time can obscure truth, but can also preserve it, waiting for the right moment to surface. And as the town moves forward, planting new crops, building new houses, welcoming new residents who know nothing of what once consumed this place, the lesson remains embedded, quiet but enduring. The past is never as distant as it seems. It watches, it waits, and sometimes when conditions align, it speaks, clear, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. The ripple effects continue long after anyone stops using the word breakthrough. The town no longer measures time by before and after the arrest, but the recalibration is still happening quietly, internally, in ways that don't show up on calendars. It shows up in how people lock their doors or don't, in how parents talk to their children about safety, about trust, about the myth that bad things only happen elsewhere. The solved cold case has become a lens through which the past is reinterpreted and the future cautiously reconsidered. Local law enforcement feels the shift first. Younger deputies arrive with a different posture toward old files. They no longer see dust as a sign of irrelevance. They see it as a challenge. Veteran officers notice the change during briefings, in the kinds of questions asked, in the refusal to accept phrases like nothing left to go on. Language matters. The cold case taught them that endings are often provisional, that certainty can be borrowed but never owned. An evidence room audit begins, prompted not by scandal but by self-awareness. Boxes are inventoried, seals checked, logs digitized. It is tedious work, unglamorous, invisible. Yet every item handled feels charged with possibility. A fingerprint card, a strand of hair, a scrap of fabric preserved more out of habit than hope. Each one represents a decision made decades earlier by someone who chose not to throw it away. That choice now feels monumental. In the prosecutor's office, the case is cited during orientation for new hires, not as a victory lap, but as a cautionary tale. They talk about delayed justice, about witnesses who died waiting, about families who lived with unanswered questions for half a lifetime. The lesson is clear. When the system moves slowly, people pay the price. Even when it eventually works, the cost is measured in years that cannot be returned. The victim's extended family navigates a strange new phase. For so long, grief had a direction. It pointed outward toward the unknown. Now it folds inward, complicated by confirmation. Some relatives feel relief, others anger, others an unexpected emptiness. One cousin admits she misses the version of the story where hope still had edges, where answers were imagined, not fixed. Certainty, she learns, has its own weight. They receive a letter from a stranger in another state, someone whose own family is caught in an unresolved case. The writer thanks them, says their story gave him hope. He writes about waiting, about birthdays that pass without calls, about rooms kept unchanged. The letter is read aloud at a family gathering. The room's silent except for breathing. It reminds them that their pain, while singular, is not isolated. In town, the annual fair returns, brighter and louder than it's been in years. Rides spin, music blares, children run with sticky hands. Life asserts itself without apology. For many, this is the first time the fair feels uncomplicated. No whispered warnings. No scanning faces in the crowd. The absence of fear is subtle, but it is there, woven into the noise. Yet even joy carries memory. Near the edge of the fairgrounds, a small group stands longer than others at a booth selling local history books. One volume includes a chapter on the cold case, newly updated. The group flips through it slowly, as if pacing themselves. They buy a copy, not because they don't know the story, but because they want to see it contained, bound, finite. The convicted man begins the slow routine of prison life, his world reduced to schedules and walls. Appeals are discussed, motions filed, the machinery of post-conviction process grinding forward. From the outside, it looks like resistance. From the inside, it may be something else entirely. Habit, denial, or simply the last exercise of agency available. The legal system accommodates this, not out of sympathy, but out of principle. Finality must be earned, not assumed. In the state capitol, legislators cite the Minnesota case during debates about funding forensic science. Some frame it as proof that investment pays off. Others question the cost, the rarity of such outcomes. The debate is familiar, cyclical. But this time, the example is close, tangible. Not an abstract statistic, but a name, a date, a town that can be pointed to on a map. That specificity changes the tone, if not the outcome. A journalist who covered the case from the beginning sits at her desk late one evening, scrolling through old notes. She finds her first article, written when she was barely out of college. The language is cautious, speculative, filled with allegedly and according to sources. She compares it to her most recent piece, written after the conviction. The difference is stark. The confidence now is not bravado, but accumulation. Years of waiting distilled into a few decisive sentences. She considers writing a follow-up, something reflective, something about aftermath. Then she stops. Not every story needs to be extended. Sometimes restraint is the final act of respect. At a nearby university, a criminology professor assigns the case as required reading. Students analyze timelines, evidence handling, investigative missteps. They debate what could have been done differently, armed with hindsight that feels unfair but instructive. The professor reminds them that they will one day be inside these systems, making decisions without the luxury of knowing how things end. The cold case is not just history. It is rehearsal. In the town's cemetery, a headstone is cleaned by volunteers, its inscription worn by decades of weather. Flowers are placed quietly, without ceremony. The act is small, almost invisible, but it matters. It acknowledges continuity, a line drawn between past and present. The volunteers leave without speaking, their footsteps fading into the grass. The sheriff receives a call from another county, asking for advice on reopening an old file. He listens, offers what he can. There is no formula, he explains. Only patience, documentation, and a willingness to be wrong. When the call ends, he sits for a moment, phone still in his hand, aware of how much his perspective has changed. Success has not made him confident. It has made him cautious. In private moments, residents still ask themselves questions they will never voice publicly. Did we miss something? Did we look away too easily? Could we have known? These questions don't demand answers. They function as reminders, checks against complacency. The cold case resolution did not absolve the community. It challenged it to be more attentive, more honest. As summer deepens, the fields grow tall again, obscuring the horizon in places. The landscape looks much as it did in 1986, and that similarity is unsettling. It suggests that time passes whether or not understanding keeps pace. But there is a difference now, subtle but profound. The land no longer feels like a keeper of secrets. It feels like a witness that has finally been heard. The story continues to circulate beyond Minnesota, referenced in articles, seminars, podcasts. Each retelling reshapes it slightly, emphasizing different angles. Science, persistence, tragedy, justice delayed. No single version captures it fully. That, too, feels appropriate. Real stories resist containment. One evening, a town hall meeting is held to discuss community safety initiatives. Attendance is higher than usual. People speak candidly, without panic, without denial. They talk about lighting, about youth programs, about mental health resources. The conversation is pragmatic, forward-looking. The cold case has shifted the focus from fear to responsibility. As the meeting ends, chairs scrape against the floor, conversations resume. Someone jokes. Someone sighs. Life moves on, not because the past has been forgotten, but because it has been acknowledged. The Minnesota 1986 cold case solved. DNA match Rock's quiet farming town. That headline once carried shock, disbelief, awe. Now it carries something steadier. A reminder that truth is patient, that evidence endures, that silence does not equal absence. The case no longer dominates the present, but it informs it, shaping decisions in ways both visible and unseen. And somewhere, in another town, another file sits unopened, waiting.